product that we roast. And is that not fair enough? I mean, you sell a custard square, you know, you use whole eggs, don't you? You just don't use egg whites. You determine how you'll make that custard square.
But if I want tomato sauce with my custard square, what's wrong with that? It's a matter of taste.
But restaurateurs and what's the cafe owners? They will go with that. They are entitled. Cafaristas. Thank you very much. That sounds like a medical device. Cafaristas are entitled to run cafes as they see fit. I found myself. Somewhat against my will, but I was overruled by wife and daughter and mother-in-law last week in Coromandel town at a vegetarian cafe for lunch. They for reasons I will never fully understand, choose not to eat real food, and so they serve vegetables, and that's all they serve. Now, I'm not going to start some campaign to tell them they can't push their vegetalist agenda. I will simply go to a whole food cafe that serves cow, and that's my choice. So if these guys are similarly wrong-headed and want to leave out the flavourful, important bit of the milk, then let them do so to their own foolish detriment. It's not, just don't call it a flat white, though. Demonstrably, it's not.
Addison Dale is joining us. And Addison is from Christchurch's Pure Cafe Company, and Addison Dale is New Zealand's reigning Barista of the Year. Good afternoon, Addison.
Good afternoon.
Thank you for coming on, and what is your position in this debate, please?
I kind of tend to side with the cafes. I think the cafe owner should... they're creating an environment to service the customers, and it's often a reflection of the people that own the cafes themselves, and I think they should be able to serve whatever they like, really.
Isn't the customer always right? That's the obvious question.
Yeah, I guess the customer is always right, but like down in Christchurch, we've got a healthy food cafe that specialises in producing clean food, so we don't use any cane sugar, for example. So if someone comes to us and wants a big cheesy pie or a sugary slice or something, we can't please them in that respect. So
that's a point.
I think it's entirely up to the cafe owner.
But where do you draw the line? What about caramel lattes and cinnamon on top and all those little things that creep into a fine coffee? Where do you draw the line, Addison?
Well, we personally still serve trim milk, or we use light milk, which is somewhere between trim and blue.
Sure.
But we don't do flavoured shots of any description because we do our best not to use any cane sugar. And you're obviously going to get some customers that don't agree with that, and then they'll just go somewhere else. And they might enjoy somewhere else better because it has what they're after.
Yeah, and how can you fault that position, really? I mean, Addison can serve what he wants.
Yeah, I mean, it doesn't stop it being an abomination, but he's well entitled to serve it. If people people like that, then so be it. And if they want the caramel all over the top, they can go to Starbucks. And in the end, people will seriously find the cafes that they like. I mean, I know in Pukekohe, I know the cafes that make the best coffee, and they're the ones I go to. The other ones, they make adequate coffee, and I don't bother with them because I don't like them as much. It's all down to personal preference. This is a free market.
Duncan?
I quite like the assertions of absolute truth in respect of coffee.
This is the most serious and important topic we've had all day.
He is the Barista of the Year, Duncan.
What is art? So, Addison, I'd be... What's wrong with a trim flat white? I mean, Addison, what am I doing wrong? Why haven't I not been educated in this important matter?
I don't think if you want a trim flat white and the cafe's willing to give you a trim flat white, then there's nothing wrong with that. It's totally up to the cafe owners as to how...
You've still got a slightly condescending tone, as if you feel slightly sorry for me.
Addison, I think you've argued pretty well. Thank you for joining us too, Addison Dale, on the panel. According to Time magazine, those who drink low-fat milk have a higher chance of being overweight later on in life. And so you're helping these people, is the argument, by refusing to give them a trim latte. But that's a controversial point of view. Speaking of which, I haven't left you much time for this, but it's Auckland Anniversary Day today, upper half of the North Island, actually, celebrating British sovereignty originally.
Yeah, shouldn't you be on holiday today, Jim?
And that is, we're serving the nation
There we go.
The boss of Air New Zealand now wants a new flag. That's been in the news. Winston Peters says it makes no sense for John Key to keep knighthoods, be friendly with royals, not have a republic, but at the same time want to change the flag. Do you agree with that?
Well, I think that Winston Peters is wrong to be shocked that something that John Key says makes no sense. There's hardly news. I think that your man Luxon is his name.
Yes.
Air New Zealand chief is a businessman who's promoting New Zealand and New Zealand business abroad, and so I suspect he's speaking from a business point of view rather than from a cultural or a patriotic point of view. So I think you need to temper his views on that regard.
The Oxford Union, Duncan, decided to remove its Cecil Rhodes statue, an issue we all know about by now, I think, and the voting was very close, and the contrary argument was that you'd need to be taking down Winston Churchill's statue as well. Anyway, Money has talked, and the students have disagreed with it in an Oxford-wide poll. They say it's politically motivated iconoclasm, but Money's talked, and Oxford's not going to bring Cecil Rhodes down because a lot of its money from benefactors will dry up.
Yeah. It's interesting, isn't it? I mean, if you think of all the statues that exist across the world, look, the statues go back thousands of years, and each one of those people lived in their own time and did some things which, from our perspective, are pretty reprehensible. On the other hand, they also did some things which, in their own time, Cecil Rhodes is an example of that, were pretty amazing. Now, Cecil Rhodes is a particularly colourful character and particularly polarising because he epitomises what colonialism was, both its strengths and its pretty terrible weaknesses and foibles. But having said that, I really don't see how it is so evil to simply have that statue there saying he was a guy who had this impact, his Rhodes Scholarship and those legacies, as well as all of those other things that went with him, which we don't admire at all. It doesn't authenticate or endorse what he's done.
He did stipulate the right of Africans to vote and that his scholarships be awarded regardless of race. And there was one awarded to an African within 5 years of his death, I think.
But what I'm hearing from Duncan, I'm afraid, is a little bit of, well, at least he made the trains run on time. So,
I don't know if that's an entirely fair characterisation of Duncan's position.
No, it's quite unfair, and that's not entirely unusual.
Duncan Webb, thank you for being on the panel today. Nice to have you back in 2016.
Thank you.
And you too, Steve McCabe.
Thanks very much.
Enjoy the school year.
Oh, yes.
Thanks, everybody, and we're back tomorrow. Checkpoint with John Campbell follows.
Kia ora everyone, welcome to Checkpoint with John Campbell on RNZ National. We're on the radio, of course, screening live on Freeview Channel 50, streaming live on the Radio New Zealand website. However you're doing so, thank you for joining us tonight. It's anniversary day in the upper half of the North Island. And in Nelson, lovely to have your company. If you're in those places, it's TPP week, opinions still divided. Protests pending, but how big and in what form? The government is confidently standing by the agreement. I asked Trade Minister Todd McClay why. Food for the elderly in Otago, Meals on Wheels source frozen meals from the North Island, then reheat them in the Deep South. We talked to one volunteer who says she wouldn't feed some of it to her dog. Iowa, Trump out in front for the Republicans, Clinton leads Sanders for the Democrats. Voting starts soon. We're there. We're live at Music Festival Laneway, and race relations conciliator Susan Devoy joins us live in the studio. But first, here's Katrina Batten with RNZ News.
Kia ora, good evening. The lawyer for the former mayor of Pitcairn Island says his client had hundreds of thousands of child sex images on his computer for a reason. Michael Warren denies 25 charges of possessing sexually explicit films and photos of children and is on trial at the Pitcairn Supreme Court, sitting via video link in Auckland. The Crown says police found 400,000 explicit images stored on Mr Warren's laptop, hard drives and CDs seized from his office and home on Pitcairn Island. Mr Warren's lawyer, Tony Ellis, said his client wanted to understand the meaning of child pornography in the light of the Pitcairn child abuse trials 10 years ago. The government has joined a legal battle to keep $1.2 billion housing development in Auckland on track. Two community groups, the Three Kings United Groups and the Southern Epsom Planning Group, lodged an appeal at the Environment Court last year to stop the redevelopment of the Three Kings quarry, citing environmental concerns. Mohammed Hassan reports.
The government has announced it's joining the Auckland Council and Fletcher Residential to fight the appeal. The Housing Minister Nick Smith says the redevelopment would build 1,500 apartments and townhouses, but wouldn't say how many would be affordable housing. Dr. Smith says the community groups had their issues heard by independent commissioners during consultation and were overruled. He says it's concerning that small groups are able to cause a huge delay for such a large housing project. This is Mohammed Hassan.
The Health and Disability Commissioner says two independent community midwives let down a first-time mother whose baby died. In a report today, Anthony Hill says a newborn baby who appeared well at birth lost a massive amount of weight in the weeks following birth, developing severe dehydration and other problems and dying in hospital. He says the unnamed lead midwife failed to tell the mother to see a paediatrician, opting instead for a plan that lacked specifics and was not backed by home visits and monitoring of the baby's weight.
We had a first-time mum who was asking for advice and she was let down by the team that was providing care for her. And again, it shows the necessity of doing the face-to-face look. The bottom line is that the babe should have been reweighed, should have been visited, should have been assessed, and I and my expert are critical of that.
Anthony Hill. He began investigating the case in 2014 after the mother complained that no one else should experience what she had gone through. In another case, a caregiver and the residential home he worked for breached the rights of a disabled man who died in their care. The Deputy Health and Disability Commissioner, Rose Wall, says the home's operator, Creative Abilities, and the caregiver, known as Mr. C, failed to provide the appropriate standard of services to the man. He died in late 2013 after Mr. C failed to put a pillow behind his head and shoulders after transferring him out of a wheelchair and into bed. The man, who suffered from sleep apnea, cerebral palsy and epilepsy, was found struggling to breathe by Mr. C, who had gone to the bathroom to wet a flannel. Despite attempting CPR, the man, who was not named, died. Ms. Wall recommends the caregiver and Creative Abilities apologise to the man's family and the home conduct an internal audit of its patient plans and the adequacy of its staff training program. American presidential hopefuls are making a last pitch to voters in the state of Iowa ahead of the first election in the race for the party nominations. Donald Trump has been leading the field for the Republicans. Hillary Clinton is narrowly the frontrunner for the Democrats. The BBC's correspondent Gary O'Donoghue describes the candidates' last-minute campaigning.
They've been fanning out across the state, doing their last whistle-stop tour of this large rural state, getting to see as many people as possible, as many places as possible. Particularly on the Republican side, every vote really does count. An extra tick in the box for you could make the difference in terms of the numbers. So that's been happening, and they've been hitting the airways with their latest campaign ads, of course, which play a big part in these presidential nomination races.
Gary O'Donoghue reporting. A police operation is taking place at an unspecified number of schools across Sydney. The police say the operation is a precaution. It follows the evacuation of 6 schools in Sydney and the Illawarra region following threats on Friday. In sport, the New Zealand cricket selectors have named 4 fast bowlers and 3 spinners in their squad for next month's 2020 World Cup in India, while Canterbury's Matt Henry has missed out. The coach Mike Hesson confirmed this morning that the paceman Mitchell McClenaghan has recovered enough from his fractured eye socket to come into selection contention following an operation on Friday. Senior paceman Tim Southey and Trent Bolt will lead the attack, with Henry considered extremely unlucky not to make the cut. Black Cap selector Gavin Larson stresses that it's all about balance.
There's always tough decisions that have to be made when you're balancing up a squad. Matt is very unlucky. He's a form horse at the moment, bowling exceptionally well in ODI cricket. But when we had a look at the pace lineup that we wanted, Tim and Trent, proven experience, Mitch McClenaghan bowling through the middle predominantly and has the ability to bowl at the death, and of course the pace of Adam Milne. You can't beat pace.
Nathan McCullum, Mitchell Santner and Ish Sodhi are the 3 spinners, and the uncapped batsman Henry Nicholls has been included. He'll also cover wicketkeeper. Wanaka freestyle Jossie Wells has created history by becoming the first New Zealander to win a gold medal at the prestigious X Games. Wells won the men's slopestyle event at the Winter X Games in Aspen, Colorado. And after parting ways with the Ghanaian import Jeffrey Sarpong, the Wellington Phoenix have signed 21-year-old striker Alex Jones from English Championship football side Birmingham City. Jones is on loan till the end of the A-League season. That's the news.
Tonight on Night's Mood Shifts. What on earth is the evolutionary benefit of feeling miserable? Dr. Iran Elder tries to explain. Our window on the world is a guide to Einstein's theory of relativity, E equals mc squared and all that. And all that is 100 years old now. And this week's after-dinner scientist Stella McQueen wants to talk about eels and the places they get to on Nights with me, Brian Crump, after the news at 7 on RNZ National.
Met service weather to midnight tomorrow. Northland and Auckland, fine spells, isolated showers in Northland today and in Auckland tomorrow afternoon and evening. Waikato to Whanganui, including Coromandel, Bay of Plenty and the Central High Country, fine spells with isolated showers. For Gisborne to Wairarapa, also Wellington, fine. Manawatu to Kapiti, mainly fine but cloudy with patchy drizzle overnight and tomorrow morning. Marlborough, Nelson, Buller, Westland and Canterbury, mainly fine but isolated showers about the ranges tomorrow afternoon and evening. Otago and Southland mainly fine but isolated showers spreading to the coast for a time tomorrow morning and light rain about Stewart Island from late this afternoon to tomorrow evening. Fiordland mostly cloudy with patchy drizzle mainly about the fjords, and the Chatham Island mostly cloudy. A few light showers clearing this afternoon. It's 5:08.
Thanks, Katrina. See you at 5:30. Welcome to Checkpoint, everyone. Let's go to the TPP. Of course, it's all on this week. It's being signed in Auckland. The numbers are coming thick and fast with just 3 days to go until the Trans-Pacific Partnership gets officially inked. The much-touted financial benefits of the TPP are under scrutiny as never before, as both opponents and TPP backers try to sell the public on its merits or otherwise, depending on your point of view. It's still unclear what the signing by the 12 TPP ministers on Thursday is actually going to involve. Some Auckland iwi are refusing to be part of the official pōhiri for the signing because they believe it will undermine the country's sovereignty. The government's point man on the deal, Tim Grosser, has taken up his ambassadorship in Washington. So this is falling on the shoulders of Trade Minister Todd McClay, and he joins us on the line now, I hope. Are you there, Minister?
John, good afternoon.
Good afternoon. Nice to talk to you. Welcome. What's happening on Thursday? Have you got a pōhiri sorted? Do you know what's going to take place?
Yes, we have. Look, it's a very big day for New Zealand. It is actually a big deal for us to be given the ability or the right with the 11 other countries who we trade very closely with to host the signing of New Zealand's biggest trade agreement. And so, look, we're taking it very, very seriously. There will be a pōhiri. The Ministry of Foreign Affairs is going to put out quite a bit more information tomorrow around details of exactly what will be happening. So I'll leave that to them. But there will be a pōhiri, yes.
Okay.
It's customary in New Zealand to welcome our visitors, even when we won't always agree with everything they have to say.
Okay. Michael Froman, the US Trade Representative, he's here already? He's in the country?
Look, I'm not going to talk about exactly who's here, but all of the countries will be represented.
Okay, it's my understanding some negotiations are still taking place around the biologics, the generics, and that Michael Froman is still trying to lead a charge, as it were, on behalf of the US pharmaceutical industry. This is important, isn't it? Because biologics and their exclusivity and the barrier to the entry of generics into the market, which are cheaper, is really important for Pharmac and for the cost of drugs in New Zealand. Is Michael Froman, is the US still leading a charge on behalf of US pharmaceutical companies?
John, I agree with you completely. It is a very important issue. It goes fundamentally to some of the things that we said were a bottom line for the New Zealand government when we negotiated the Pharmac model and good access to medicines. I've had no approach from the US delegation, nor am I interested in one. An agreement was reached. There will be 5 years of protection over these things in New Zealand and Australia as well. We see that as more than sufficient, and therefore that's not something that we will be opening negotiations.
The problem is that US Congress wants more, don't they? And the US Congress is heavily lobbied by Big Pharma, the pharmaceutical companies. They want more.
Well, look, I think there will always be different groups who have interests that want more. We're seeing that very much in New Zealand. There are some people who are saying parts of the agreement are not good enough, and we shouldn't have got ready to put ink on paper. Ultimately, it's for each individual country to work out their process to domestically to ratify. And as far as New Zealand's concerned, the bottom line is that we went to the country on. Around various things are in place with the numbers.
Can we return to those bottom lines? I want to go back to 28th of July last year. The Prime Minister was asked about increases to Pharmac costs. At first he said there may be some increase. Then on the same day he revised his position downwards and he said, and I quote, "I'm not even really convinced Pharmac will end up having to pay a little bit more." Is that still the case?
Yes, that's very much the case. So the analysis that's been done on the agreement that I will be signing on behalf of New Zealand on Thursday says that there are some small increases in cost around the margins. And I think overall they say for Pharmac it'll be about $2 million a year. This is as part of an $800 million budget, so that's not even 0.25%.
And you're not concerned, you are not concerned it's going to get a lot bigger than that in order to satisfy and get the TPP through Congress?
No, I'm not at all. So the very important thing is, when we sign this agreement on Thursday, that's the agreement that each country takes to its parliament or go through their own process. And once the ink is on the paper, that's it. That's the 6,000 pages, and that's what we're putting through the New Zealand Parliament.
Can we talk about investor-state dispute settlements, right? Yeah. So this is if somebody has a disagreement, if a big corporation, a foreign corporation, a multinational corporation has a disagreement with something that New Zealand is doing, they can go to investor-state dispute settlement. Are you satisfied this is going to work?
Yes, I am. And so actually it's not straightforward that if they have a disagreement that they could go to investor-state dispute settlement. So what we have in the TPP is the same as we have in many other agreements, John. It's been in place in New Zealand for about 27 years. And really what it says is that it gives a guarantee. So in the case of a New Zealand company investing overseas in another country that may not have the same democratic approaches or the same approach to courts or openness in courts as we have, where a government makes a decision that goes contrary to commitments that have been made previously, they have the ability or the right to go and look to take a case. That doesn't mean that that government has to change their law and change their position. It just means that if Fonterra invests significantly in a country overseas, and after a couple of years, that government makes changes, which they're able to do, but it has a direct impact upon the investment that Fonterra made because of some undertakings, they're able to then to go and take
Minister, if this is such a good system, why are the Europeans going with it? Now, I wonder if all our listeners know that the Europeans are trying to negotiate a similar agreement with the US. Instead of the TPP, it's the TTIP, transatlantic, but it's the same kind of deal. But the EU have entirely thrown the system out. They criticise it for not being subjected to democratic principles and public scrutiny. They've come up with a completely new form of investment court system, which they regard as much more transparent, independent and rigorous. Why did Europe set the bar higher than New Zealand?
Well, it's not so much that they have set the bar higher because they're still working through a process there. Incidentally, I'll be going to Europe in about 2 weeks' time to sit down with the Commissioner and talk in detail about our FTA negotiation with them. Look, and as far as the investor-state dispute mechanism is concerned in TPP, I'm extremely comfortable with where it's landed.
What goes wrong? Is there an appeal process allowed for under this?
There are significant numbers of safeguards that have been built in.
Minister, is there an appeal process allowed for under this?
Ultimately,
is there the right of appeal, and is there someone to appeal to?
So ultimately, the final appeal that could take place if a government in any one of the TPP countries didn't agree with an outcome is that within the agreement, the sovereign right to withdraw from that agreement or to make changes. So, John, the very important thing to focus on here is not whether or not ultimately a court or something else can make a decision. It's the likelihood of that happening, and whether or not in the case that it's justified, we have the ability to defend it. With the exclusions that have been put in place, that tobacco can't take a case, that we have the right to make any decision.
That exclusion is going to remain. That exclusion, you're absolutely certain that exclusion is going to remain? You give us your word on the radio now that tobacco exclusion is going to remain?
I will be signing the agreement on Thursday, and therefore, as part of the legislation we put through, that was the commitment as far as New Zealand's concerned.
Okay. Is this the right thing for New Zealand? Obviously, you're going to say yes, but there are so many people who just have fear and trepidation that the interests of big corporates will be put ahead of the interests of small people.
Look, it is imperative that New Zealand is part of this agreement. It's a good agreement for New Zealand. It opens up access to 800 million consumers in 11 countries who spend $27 trillion on GDP every year. It's inconceivable that New Zealand is not part of that. Not only that, though, John, the World Bank has done some analysis and said of all the TPP countries, we are fourth best off in as far as outcomes, what we get out of this agreement. Incidentally, our neighbours Australia and the US are at the bottom of this list. So in as far as New Zealand's concerned, it's a very, very good agreement. It's better than the China agreement, and it would be disastrous for the New Zealand economy if we didn't sign it.
Todd McClay, Trade Minister, thank you very much indeed for joining us this evening. We really appreciate your time. As the week goes on, we will speak to people who feel less enthusiastic about the TPP. This is a fascinating debate, but it's good to hear from Todd McClay, the Trade Minister. Right, 17 minutes past 5. The former Mayor of Pitcairn has gone on trial today, charged with possessing sexually explicit films and photos of children. Michael Warren appeared by a video link to a courtroom in Auckland today where the judge's bench was flanked by the flags of Pitcairn and the United Kingdom's Union Jack. Mr Warren denies 25 charges relating to over 800 child sex films and images. Our Auckland Court reporter Edward Gay joins us in the studio now. Edward, nice to have you here. I'm going to get out of the way of this one because I don't really know what's going on, and these are heavy old charges, aren't they? Has a defence been mounted?
Yeah, there has been a defence mounted. First, if I can start with a Crown case, though. I mean, this goes back to 2010 when Michael Warren was the Mayor of Pitcairn, and Pitcairn, founded by the Bounty mutineers back in the 18th century. It's got a colourful past. Nowadays it has a population of between 40 and 50 people, and it's controlled by it's a British Overseas Territory in the Pacific. In April 2010, Mr Warren queried with diplomatic staff a payment that he was due for an overseas trip. But he sent this email from an email in a completely different name to his, and that sort of raised alarm bells with diplomatic staff. The staff member concerned, she actually Googled this email address and found that it was linked to a chat room which also contained sex chats. She then called in police, and at the time stationed in Pitcairn was a New Zealand sergeant seconded there, Jeff Midland. He got search warrants, obtained Mr Warren's laptop, hard drives, CDs, and it was here that a large amount of images were found.
When you say a large amount, how many?
Well, 1.6 million images found, but as Kieran Raftery pointed out, he's the Crown prosecutor, he said most of those were innocent images. You know, they include information on the Seventh-day Adventist Church in the US.
So in terms of the images for which he's being prosecuted, what sort of number are we talking about?
Well, we're talking, 400,000 of them were explicit, but they contained adult information. Yeah. About 1,000 of them, though, did contain children, and also evidence of a sexually explicit chat with a 15-year-old girl. At the time, Sergeant Midland said he asked Mr Warren if he had any child pornography on these computers. Mr Warren said that he did, but that was because he didn't understand what child pornography was, and he wanted to understand what it was in light of the 2004 Pitcairn child sex cases. Mr Raftery, in his opening, said that that those cases back in 2004, they actually they were about child abuse, not pictures.
Okay. So the Crown simply doesn't accept that argument at all. And how long is this going to go on for? Have you got any idea how long this is set down for, Edward? Well,
it's going to be part heard here in Auckland. We got the the expert evidence being heard here in Auckland, and then it's going to be heard over in Pitcairn as well.
Same judge?
Same judge, Justice Tompkins from New Zealand. He normally sits down in Wellington. Today we also heard from Mr Warren's lawyer, Tony Ellis, and he said that his client had a comparatively moderate collection of images when compared to other cases. He said that Mr Warren didn't fit with what members of the public would call or term a paedophile, and he said that this case had to be looked at in a Pitcairn context where small amount of adults on Pitcairn Island, and many of those were already in relationships.
Edward Gay, our Auckland Court reporter. Thanks very much indeed, Edward. So this is going to have a sequel in a second part of the trial up in Pitcairn itself. 21 minutes past 5. For the past fortnight, the Compass Group has been providing meals for Dunedin hospital patients since the Southern DHB began outsourcing its hospital kitchen. The Compass Group trucks frozen meals to the South Island from Auckland and Tauranga for distribution. The meals are reheated and provided to hospital patients and to Meals on Wheels clients. Now, Liz Green is a Meals on Wheels volunteer. She says the new meals provided by Compass are simply not up to scratch. In fact, she says she wouldn't feed some of them to her dog.
We've been delivering Meals on Wheels in our local community for the last 8 years.
And by we, you mean you and your husband?
Yes, I do.
And have you seen a deterioration in the quality of the meals during that time?
The original meals were all very much the same, but the new meal that has recently come out is not of the standard that I would expect, particularly for such a vulnerable sector of the community.
Can you describe them to us? We're looking at a photo for people who are watching online, but for people who aren't watching online, I can't even tell you what that is. It's on a bed of rice and it's 2 brown things.
That was a meal that was had in the hospital made by the Compass Group. I can't say whether that went out as Meals on Wheels. The meal that I have seen was meant to be a sausage casserole, which was served with mashed potato and some other vegetables, but it was very watery, it was very wet. We end up with a spare meal every time, just in case somebody has a visitor and needs a second meal, or in case of something happening and one of the meals being compromised in its seal or just not being suitable to leave. And I brought that meal home on Thursday and had a good look and actually tasted what was being taken out, because we had so many comments that the meals were not fit for consumption. And it was incredibly salty, it was full of water. The sausages in the casserole were, well, I wouldn't give them to the dog.
You wouldn't give them to the dog? They were that bad?
They actually went down the waste disposal. I have a fox terrier here who would have loved to have had a sausage.
And okay, so you wouldn't give it to your own fox terrier?
No, and I wouldn't even give it to my chickens. The amount of salt in it would have been too much for my chickens.
So where are these meals being prepared, Liz?
To my knowledge, they're being prepared somewhere in the North Island, whether it's Tauranga or whether it's Auckland, and I apologise for the pronunciation.
That's right. And how are they and so are they frozen? How do they get to you in Dunedin?
To my knowledge, they come from their manufacturing place to Dunedin as frozen packages and are then reheated to blisteringly hot before we take them out to the clients that need Meals on Wheels.
And previously they were made from scratch locally?
Yes, they were.
Okay. Tell me about your clients. Gosh, that's a terrible word. Tell me about the elderly people that you are delivering these meals to. What do they make of them? What do they say about them?
Some of them, I believe, are just happy that they've got a hot meal, so they are basically settling for whatever's given to them. But others have travelled in their time and have seen different cuisines, and they understand what a nutritious meal should be like. They're intelligent people. They're not people that deserve to have second-rate food. They are very engaging. They're lovely to spend that few minutes with each time we go. And it's nice, you know, they're always so grateful to us. They're grateful to Age Concern because they're organising everything, and Age Concern do a brilliant job. But when it comes to a meal that one of the ladies in particular put out and could not eat, partly because it was so wet and sloppy and had spoilt in the reheating, and secondly because of the amount of salt in it, it was just inedible. It was really not nice.
Liz, how much are they paying for each meal?
That I honestly can't tell you. I believe it's around $5 or $6, but you would have to find out from Age Concern. We don't have any dealings with that.
An 87-year-old woman is quoted in the ODT this morning saying, describing one of the meals she received as disgusting. Is that over the top, or have you seen disgusting meals going out?
I've heard about disgusting meals more than I've seen. We go out once a fortnight, and this was the first time that we'd taken the new food. And to be told out of the 8 clients that we spoke to, that 3 were very dissatisfied, and one is the lady in the paper. She was definitely going to cancel those meals the next day. She wasn't going to have them again after Friday. And an 87-year-old shouldn't have to be looking for a new source of nutrition.
What will they do instead? If they're not getting the Meals on Wheels, they lose the meal, and also in many instances they lose social engagement too, right? There would be occasions where you would be their sole visitor in the day?
Yes, I've turned up on somebody's birthday, and a lady who was 93, and I was the only person that she saw on her birthday. So it's a very important thing for anybody delivering for any of the Meals on Wheels services, whether it's the one from Age Concern or one of the other kitchens that do Meals on Wheels, but they are more expensive. I don't know whether they have the same ability that the Age Concern franchise had, which is to make sure that they have meals suitable for all dietary requirements. We have people on our run who not only are diabetic, we have people who need pureed food, we have people who need low residue food following bowel surgery or something of that type. They've got to be catered for in a very specific way to make sure they get the right nutrients.
And is the new regime doing that?
They must be, because we do get the meals named for people who have specific needs. But what their meals are like, I have no idea. We don't actually get to see them. They're in sealed containers, so I don't know whether they look any better or any worse. It's a very challenging part of the service.
Liz Green, so we called Compass today for comment and left messages. We got no response. It is Auckland anniversary today. Their head office is in Auckland. We contacted Age Concern. Its executive officer, Susan Davidson, referred us to patient services at the Southern DHB. You guess what happened next? Ms Davidson said patient services would be dealing with complaints from Meals on Wheels customers as well as Dunedin hospital patients. So we called the Southern DHB, and of course we're still awaiting comment. We'll let you know what happens there. Coming up, Trump's out in front for the Republicans. Clinton leads Sanders for the Democrats. I think that's quite tight. We'll Skype our political editor, Jane Patterson, who's in Des Moines, Iowa, and trim flat white or full flat white. The cafe under 5 are not offering a choice. It's a bizarre story, but quite different from what we've been led to believe. We'd love to hear from you in any way. Our email address is checkpoint@radionz.co.nz. You can text 2101, Facebook and Twitter, checkpoint just checkpoint RNZ. Goodness gracious, John. Iowa voters are being bombarded with political meetings and rallies on the eve of the Iowa caucus. It's the first state in the US to start voting in the process to select the candidates to contest the presidency for both the Republicans and the Democrats, and is seen as an important indicator in the primary race. Of course, our political editor, Jane Patterson, is at a rally for Ted Cruz in Des Moines, where Bill Bryson also comes from. How are you going, Jane? How's Cruz going?
Cruz is in fine form. It's the last rally of the night here. All of the politicians have been crisscrossing across the state. There have been several rallies from the Democrats and the Republicans, and Ted Cruz just wrapping up now, quite a few jokes, talking about family, talking about the things that he intends to do with everyone eyeing those caucuses that start tomorrow evening here in the US.
Of course, Jane, it's fascinating for people who are watching, but for people who aren't, I will describe. It's actually quite a small crowd behind you. Or are they coming out of a hall? Is that overfilled? Because poor old Cruz is in trouble in Iowa, isn't he?
He's actually come up to Trump quite a lot. They're pretty much neck and neck.
Wow.
Although, I'm thinking about Bernie Sanders and Hillary Clinton. No, Trump's taken the lead. Excuse me, it's been a long day. So Cruz is still within striking distance of Trump, though, but there's very much a feeling that Trump is on the ascendancy here. I'm not sure if my camera angle is probably showing the full crowd and that you can see Ted Cruz. There are probably, I would say, about 1,000 people here.
Okay.
And in fact, there are about another 30 people outside who haven't been let in. So not too bad a crowd, but I've just been at Bernie Sanders' rally for him, and that was huge. There were thousands of people. It was absolutely packed out and a very hyped environment.
A real grassroots excitement around Bernie Sanders. Hillary Clinton has the name, the money, the establishment, the history. Can Bernie Sanders do it?
There's a real feeling that he can.
Wow.
And as I alluded to at the start, him and Hillary Clinton are neck and neck at the moment, and Bernie Sanders, though, really interesting support, a lot of young people, but then a lot of older people as well. And I've noted that when people talk about Donald Trump and about Bernie Sanders, opposite ends of the spectrum, they say they're authentic, and that's the thing that they like about them. Bernie Sanders really starting to pull in some big crowds, as is Donald Trump around Iowa.
Fascinating contest. We look forward to you filing on the results. Thanks so much, Jane, our political editor, Jane Patterson. What a extraordinary contest. Sanders, Clinton, Donald Trump. Boy, you get something. There's something for everyone in US politics. It's 28 minutes to 6, and here's Katrina with the headlines.
The former mayor of Pitcairn Island has denied 25 charges of possessing hundreds of sexually explicit films and photos of children. Michael Warren appeared by a video link to a courtroom in Auckland today, where the judge's bench was flanked by the flags of Pitcairn and the United Kingdom's Union Jack. Mr. Warren's lawyers says his client wanted to understand the meaning of child pornography in the light of the Pitcairn child abuse trials 10 years ago. The Lions company Unison Networks says it had no record that the Taupō woman who died on Saturday after a power cut was medically dependent on electricity. 50-year-old Phi Dean died at her Taupō home after the electricity supply was cut for several hours by a road accident and shut down her breathing machine. Meals on Wheels volunteers are complaining they are now having to serve elderly people food that's not fit for consumption. 2 weeks ago, the Compass Group began providing meals for Dunedin Hospital patients and Southern District Health Board Meals on Wheels clients. One Southern DHB volunteer, Liz Green, has told Checkpoint she tried one of the dishes, one of which she says was so bad she wouldn't feed it to her dog. The government has joined a legal battle to keep a $1.2 billion housing development in Auckland on track. 2 community groups have lodged Environment Court appeal to stop the redevelopment of the Three Kings Quarry. But Housing Minister Nick Smith says they've already had their say and the city needs the houses. The small Canterbury-based dairy company Synlait has slashed its forecast milk payout and says its farmers are likely to be losing money this season. The company, which is only a few hundred suppliers, has cut its forecast to $4.20 a kilogram of milk solids from $5 because it says global milk supply is outweighing demand. And now to 10-year-old Ben Malashnig with the sports headlines.
Kia ora, good evening. The New Zealand cricket selectors have named 4 fast bowlers and 3 spinners in their squad for next month's 2020 World Cup in India. The Black Caps coach Mike Henson has confirmed that Mitchell Clenaghan has recovered enough from his fractured eye socket to come into the squad contention after an operation on Friday. The Canterbury bowler Matt Henry has missed out despite impressing against Pakistan. The Wanaka free skier Josie Wells has created history by becoming the New Zealander to win a gold medal at prestigious X Games. Wells won the men's slopestyle event at the Winter X Games in Aspen, Colorado. I'm Ben Malushnik, and that's the latest RNZ Sport headlines.
Ben, are you there? You're still there, young Ben?
Yeah.
Now, Ben, you contacted us. I don't know who contacted us, but you just dream of being a newsreader, don't you? You just can't wait to grow up. Never squander your childhood, but you're really anxious to grow up and be a newsreader, right?
Yeah.
And what did you think of that? Was that exciting?
Yes.
How long before you read the sports news were you given the sports news? How long had you had it for?
For about 20 minutes.
Okay, well, you're a real pro because you did a real good job on that.
Thank you.
And you've got your own YouTube channel, right?
Yeah.
Oh, well. Look, that was wonderful. Was it? Do you still want to do it, or are you over it now? You think, oh, I've done that. I'll move on to something else, rocket science, or you're even more determined to be a newsreader now?
I want to be a newsreader.
Okay. Well, we wish you really well. You look like how old are you?
10, nearly 11.
Yeah. So, yeah. We're very impressed, Ben. Congratulations, and thank you for joining us as a fill-in newsreader on Radio New Zealand. It was very exciting to have you, Ben.
It's okay.
Ben, just before you go, what's your YouTube channel?
Malushnik Live.
Right. We'll go and look it up and get some pointers from you.
Okay.
Okay. Thanks, Ben.
Thanks.
Okay, someone who needs no pointers is sitting beside us in the studio, Nona Peltier, our senior business journalist in Auckland. Nona, I've lost my notes. I've no idea what we're talking about. But there are some new figures out, aren't there?
There are. We've got some new figures, tourism numbers and visitor numbers that came out today. More record-breaking numbers. Incredible.
How much? What are we talking about?
Well, where should we start?
Yeah,
okay, well, let's say the New Zealand visitor numbers, tourists, these are people who come with money in their pocket to spend. 3.13 million, that's 17 consecutive months of increases, totaling a record 3.1.
And that's the year ending when?
December, and that's a 10% increase on the year earlier.
So that's 2015, in short.
Yeah, that's right.
Wow.
A big number.
How much money do those people spend?
Well, quite a lot. In fact, according to the numbers for the year ending September, they spent $13.5 billion.
Goodness gracious me.
Yeah.
So this is far and away now the country's biggest income earner, way ahead of dairy farming.
Actually, I don't know if it's way more.
Okay,
Okay, maybe it's like $500 million more, but it's still more. And of course, you know, it's interesting. The mayor of Auckland said the other day that $6.5 billion of those dollars are spent in Auckland.
So
it's incredible.
half of that money is spent in Auckland. Is that right?
Yeah. I guess it is. Well, he said it, so I don't know for sure. Just going by what he said.
Because my sense of tourism in Auckland is that people arrive here, spend the shortest possible amount of time here, and then go off to the Bay of Islands or Coromandel or Rotorua or Queenstown or wherever.
Maybe they're spending it on tour buses and plane tickets.
Yeah, okay.
Could be. Anyways, very interesting. And of course, one of the things that's happened is cruise ships. We've had a lot of people coming here on ships. And we did a story recently on that. Now, cruise ships, they're apparently set to, the number of people coming here on ships is like to increase by 1/3. And they are big spenders, let me tell you.
They get off the ship and they go berserk.
Yeah, 570 million in the last season, and that now, of course, with a third more passengers, you would expect it to increase. So I did the numbers, and that could be potentially $760 million.
Okay, now I've seen in your notes Kathmandu is written down.
Yes, now Kathmandu, look, they've had a really rough time from one of their major shareholders, Mr. Rod Duke of Briscoe Group, who wanted to take the company over. That didn't work out for him. He owns 20% of the company, though, so he can, hold them to account. And they came out last, I guess about a year, not quite a year, about 6 months ago, and they thought that they would make a full year profit for the year ending in June of $30.2 million. Mr. Duke said, I don't think so. That seems extraordinary. But guess what? They had a fantastic Christmas sale season, and they say that their first half is going to come in at $8.5 to $9.5 million. Wow. That's net profits, so they're on track. And they said that they're going gangbusters in Australia and New Zealand, and their online sales are they showing the best growth. That's great.
Have you ever been to Kathmandu when they're not having a sale, Nona?
Actually, I've never been to Kathmandu to buy anything.
They're always in sale. What are the markets doing?
The market was a little changed. It's Auckland Anniversary Day, as you know, but little change, just up 4 points to 6,175. But the volume was reasonable, and the dollar is trading at 64.7 US cents and 91.6 Australian.
Nona Peltier with us for the week. Thanks, Nona. Lovely to see you. As always. We're going to look at the Nines now. It's just 5 days until the NRL Nines kick off at Auckland's Eden Park. But interest in the event seems to be dwindling, a bit like the Sevens in Wellington. Fans flocked to the Rugby League tournament in its inaugural year, with the 2014 Nines selling out. But the NRL says the number of tickets sold are down on the first 2 years. The news follows the appalling attendance at the International Rugby Sevens tournament in Wellington at the weekend, where more than half the seats remained empty on both Saturday and Sunday, despite this being a really fine performance by New Zealand. So could the NRL Nines be at risk of going the same way as the Sevens? Former Rugby World Cup head Martin Snedden is the chief executive of the events management company Duco that's helping to coordinate the event. Martin, are you there?
G'day, John.
How are you?
Excellent, thank you. I've been to Kathmandu.
Have you? What, the place or the shop?
No, the shop.
Okay. And were they on sale at the time?
Oh, yeah, they're always on sale. You always get some deals there.
Yeah, well, it seems to work.
Quality product.
Yeah, that's right. It seems to work with them. Do you going to have to discount your tickets to get people along to the Nines? Or what's going on?
Listen, that's an appalling introduction. Let's look at some of the facts. Year one, it was about 42,000, and I think it was the novelty of the thing. Year two, we came in at about 37,000. Year three, we're picking somewhere between 35 and 37,000.
Oh, okay. So this is not a disaster. This is year 3, right?
Not. And just to put that in perspective, even in its heyday, the Sevens didn't get figures like that because they can't fit that numbers in Westpac Stadium. So it's a good event. Year 1 was a novelty, and it got off to a brilliant start. And in some ways, it's a burden when you
because it's a precedent,
it
right?
that way.
Yeah,
but
boy,
it's in a healthy state. We're looking forward to the weekend.
Gosh, there's a lot of pressure on the sporting money, though, isn't there? I mean, if we look, we've had the women's and men's tennis tournaments. We've had the cricket. Who have we had through? We've had the Sri Lankans and the Pakistanis through, and the Australians are arriving. We've had the Sevens. We've got the Nines. The Super Rugby tournament, unbelievably, is only 3 weeks away from starting. There's so much pressure on the sporting dollar.
Oh, absolutely there is. And, even this week, as you said, I was at the cricket yesterday. I'm going to be at the cricket on Wednesday at Eden Park. So you have to produce something that people really like. They want to spend their dollars at. They want to spend their time at, because the Nines is a 2-day event. So you're asking people to contemplate putting aside 2 full days of a holiday weekend. So you have to produce on the field, and you have to make the experience in the stadium great fun, so that they feel like it's worth spending the time and that they want to come again the following year.
Martin, you talk about the experience being great fun. Can I change the subject somewhat to alcohol? Too much of it and people just behave like morons. Too little of it and the organisers are accused of being the fun police. How do you get the balancing act right?
It's bloody hard. And we had the benefit, I suppose, of only starting 2 years ago. And the guys that started, Duco, Dean and David, looked hard at Wellington Sevens, realised at that stage that they basically had lost control of the alcohol situation, and it was costing the event badly in terms of its reputation. So our approach right from year 1 has been probably a slightly stricter approach. There's a partnership there with Eden Park and the police and the licensing authorities and security, where we make it clear right from the start, people are welcome to come and drink and enjoy drinking alcohol there, but it's only one part of the overall picture of the event and the experience. And for us, what's critical is what's happening on the field with the teams. I mean, we're lucky in that we've got the strong NRL brand and the 16 teams, and a lot of the stars are playing. And then off the field, it's not about everyone being in costumes. It's about a mixture of costumes and people in rugby league colours, which is a really good mix in itself. So, I think we're in for another good time this year. We just need the weather in Auckland to stay good.
Well, I'm sure it'll be good for a couple of hours and then crap for a couple of hours and then back to good. Thanks.
I was sitting there at Eden Park yesterday, and there was one point in time where it was raining and it was sunny and the lights were on in the ground.
It's just
and
nutty.
People I was with them were saying, we must be in Auckland.
This town is nutty at the moment. Martin Snedden, thank you so much. Martin Snedden talking about the NRL Nines at Eden Park this weekend. Let's leave Eden Park and, in fact, head to Syria as members of the government and the opposition gather in Geneva. How do you gather an opposition in Syria? Who are the opposition? Goodness gracious. IS has claimed responsibility for a deadly blast in Damascus that threatens to unravel any peace process. That's their intention, of course. Here's Nathan Frandino from Reuters.
At UN-mediated talks in Geneva, Syria's main opposition group says it's optimistic about the current peace efforts.
We're optimistic, and we're here to really find a solution for all Syrians, no matter what side they are on.
The UN is aiming for 6 months of negotiations, starting with a ceasefire and followed by a political settlement. But standing in the way is more death and destruction. Twin suicide blasts and a car bomb went off in Damascus on Sunday, killing more than 60 people. Islamic State claimed responsibility for the attack, which struck near Syria's holiest Shiite shrine. Syrian government delegation head Bashar al-Jafari said the attacks proved what the government has long suspected.
This confirms what the Syrian government has said over and over again, that there is a link between terrorism and those who sponsor terrorism from one side, and some political groups that pretend to be against terrorism.
Whether or not the talks can recover from the attack remains to be seen. The government and the opposition has yet to meet face-to-face. Opposition member Basma Kadmani says they want an end to government airstrikes first.
We are here for political negotiations, but we cannot start those until we have those gestures.
So far, the civil war has killed more than 250,000 people and forced more than 10 million to flee.
The Race Relations Commissioner is working on a new anti-racism campaign. Dame Susan Devoy says she's concerned about how New Zealanders will treat the newly arrived refugees after a groundswell of support for increasing the quota. Last year, the 82 Syrians landed here 2 weeks ago, along with others from Myanmar, Afghanistan, Palestine, Colombia and Iraq. Dame Susan has been outspoken when it comes to migrants and refugees. She hit the headlines last year when she supported a migrant group's policy of using non-religious Christmas greetings, prompting an outcry that she was seeking to, quote, ban Christmas. And some of the feedback she received was really, really ugly. Dame Susan Devoy is with me in the studio. I've looked really hard. You didn't say anywhere you wanted to ban Christmas, did you? Or suggest even for a moment that we should ban the language of Christmas. What were you trying to say?
Oh, well, it's simple, really. I was asked for a comment on the Auckland Regional Migrant Services calling their end-of-year lunch a festive lunch. And I defended their right to do it. They can call it what they like, really.
You were pushed really hard for a comment, weren't you?
Yeah, sort of backed into a corner, really. I probably saw it coming, but, you know, then it became the war against Christmas and I was the Grinch who was trying to steal Christmas.
Do you celebrate Christmas?
Of course I celebrate Christmas.
Do you say Merry Christmas to your children on Christmas Day and have a tree and do all that stuff?
Yeah, we do all of that, you know, and we just like most New Zealanders do, actually. But
equally, part of being a cosmopolitan 21st century country is the understanding that actually Christmas doesn't mean terribly much at all to some people, right?
No, we need to understand that, you know, and I just didn't think there was anything at all offensive of calling an end-of-year supposed Christmas lunch a festive lunch to encourage the refugees and migrants that they're trying to actually to make them feel included and come to a function.
It seems in retrospect that you were just thrown to
the wolves.
Yeah, the wolves. How did the wolves respond?
Oh, well, I think it was just one of those things that was, I don't think it was one of those things that was blown out of proportion, but I think what gets you really is the understanding or the appreciation of just how nasty New Zealanders can be. You know,
Can you tell me about the nastiness? Because I've heard of some examples and I wonder if you can clarify them for me.
Oh, well, just, you know, the constant... I mean, I got a lot more Christmas cards this year.
Saying what?
Not very nasty. I've even had lots of books sent on religion. I think they're from sort of the kind folk who think I need to understand a few things. I got a box full of dog whatevers.
Dog?
Feces. Dog shit. You know.
Someone sent you dog shit?
Yeah, and a lovely Christmas wrap parcel into my house. And
at home?
Yeah, and I think the most disturbing thing about that was that someone came during the night because it was there when I got up in the morning. And it had "you are," and I opened it up and, you know.
You are shit.
But it is what it is, John. You know that. You just...
Yeah, I do. And sometimes, you know, you have to accept the fact that as a public figure, people are going to speak to you like that, as wrong and as appalling and as grotesque that is. But what does it tell you about how hard we have to scratch before we find that kind of sentiment in our country?
Well, it's really interesting, you know, that I would have thought that was, you know, pretty much a non-issue, really, and that if we're going to get so upset about something like that, then really we should be spending that energy on talking about the things that really matter.
What really matters as the race?
That says to me more about our culture, not our cultures. And for me at Race Relations, it's really, we're at a bit of a crossroads now. And, you know, we look at our changing demographic, and I said this in an event on Saturday, what makes us uniquely different than some countries, even Australia or Canada, about multiculturalism is that ours has happened within a generation. So, you know, the communities we grew up in, you and I, John, are quite different than the ones our children are growing up in.
Yeah, fundamentally different.
Yeah. And we've got to really actually work really hard about maintaining that peaceful reputation we have and whatever. I mean, look, don't get me wrong, we've got a great record of race relations in New Zealand, but, you know, scratch below the surface sometimes, and we see the nastiness coming out.
You've been the victim of the most appalling irony, really, preposterous irony, because when you got the job, everyone said, what does this bloody woman know about race relations? She's, you know, I mean, you've lived a sheltered, cosseted kind of, you know, monocultural life. You won't be at all inclusive, and you know. And now people are going, "Oh, you're PC gone mad." You know, I mean, you're damned if you do and damned if you don't, aren't you? What has there been a road to Damascus experience? Have you learned stuff you didn't already know?
Oh, I think, you know, undoubtedly I have. I mean, you know, as twee it might say, my own life's been incredibly enriched actually by the experiences I've had. And you're right, I did grow up as a very monoculture, and it's been an eye-opener, you know. But at the end of the day, you know, I think that, you know, I'm pretty proud of the fact that I actually stand up for those who actually need a voice and need to be heard.
Yeah, and you're about to do that again with a new campaign about the refugees. There was a real groundswell of support for increasing the numbers, wasn't there? So now the reality is that these people are arriving in the country and they need homes and they need to be part of communities. And what are you urging us to do or encouraging us to do?
Yeah. Oh, I felt very heartened by the response that New Zealand had last year when, we saw that young boy, that young toddler on the beach, and, that's happened subsequently, but there've been no photos. And I think they've opened their hearts and their minds to genuinely welcoming refugees. We need to put that into practice. What's really important now is that the government are making their decision very soon, their 3-yearly review on increasing our quota, and I would sincerely hope that we actually put our humanity into action and double that quota, because that's, actually that's not doing anything actually significant. That's the very least we could do, I think.
So you're saying in your job, with your hat, double the quota?
Oh, most definitely. The officials are saying we have the capacity to do so. The refurbishment at Mangere allows us to have the, to house all those people in resettlement. We are world leaders in this.
I don't think we understand that. I mean, you've been to Mangere and I've been to Mangere, and what happens there is that people are delicately manoeuvred through the process of becoming New Zealanders. So they don't just arrive at the border, get given a bus ticket and see you later. They actually explain, and it's phenomenally successful, isn't it? Touch wood.
No, it is. Those first 6 weeks and then the wonderful work that the Red Cross does. What we do need is New Zealanders after that period to actually get in behind and support, to help them find work, to make them feel part of their communities, to encourage them, to actually make them feel like Kiwis, regardless of whether they come from. That's what's really, really important. We've got a wonderfully successful record of refugees. New Zealanders have nothing to fear. They want to be, they've come here for refuge and protection. That's what it's about. They haven't scuttlebugged into the country, and I sincerely hope the government does the right thing.
Dame Susan Devoy, Race Relations Commissioner, thanks for joining us.
My
nice
pleasure.
to talk to you.
Thank you.
This evening. Dame Susan Devoy, Race Relations Commissioner. We'd love feedback on what Dame Susan was saying, as long as it doesn't include, obviously, dog turd in a box. It's 8 minutes to 6. Are cafe owners rude if they don't offer trim milk? 2 Christchurch cafes are under fire today for only serving full-fat milk in their coffees. We'll hear from one of them in a moment, but first, Conan Young with some coffee drinkers on the streets of Christchurch.
If you're going to serve a flat white, you need full fat milk, otherwise you don't get the right froth.
It's a bad idea.
Yeah, because you need microfoam.
I'm all about drinking full fat milk. I'm from Britain, I drink Jersey milk, that's like cream. So.
Do you think if people ask for it and the cafe says, no, look, we don't do it, do you think that's fair enough?
I think maybe if you just knew stuff about coffee, I would say, yes, you can, but you just make them aware that it wouldn't be a real flat white in a smaller cup.
Take the coffee out and put a tea bag in there, and then you've got a better drink all round.
Now, this woman didn't drink trim or full-fat milk and chose oat milk instead.
When I take my milk to some cafes, they say, no, we're not going to use your milk, and so I don't go there again. So the same applies to trim milk, I think.
So you bring your own?
I do, every time I go for coffee.
Maybe that's a solution for trim milk drinkers, they can bring their own.
Absolutely, yeah, bring your own trim milk. But, if they turn you away, then that's something that you have to deal with yourself.
Littleton Coffee Company owner Stephen Mattia has copped it today after he put up a sign saying they don't do trim milk. Copped it. But rather than not offering customers a choice between trim and full-fat milk, it's actually a case of there never having been a choice. The Littleton Coffee Company offers a different experience altogether. I asked co-owner Stephen Mattia to tell me the real story.
Well, the whole story is that I know a guy that's got a herd of cows, and they're all kind of different breeds, kind of a mongrel herd, and he supplies us milk in these containers. If you can see behind me, it's a 15-litre container that we came up with just basically to get rid of our plastic packaging and to use a whole milk product that's not homogenised with our coffee.
So wait a sec, so you were sourcing this milk from a local farmer. Where is he?
He's in Oxford.
So it's not you being difficult, it's not you being rude, it's simply that you're sourcing milk in the most environmentally friendly way, and that milk comes as one variety only.
Yeah, I didn't really tell people too much about what we were doing. It's just that it was a personal choice. I mean, I don't like putting 200 to 300 plastic containers out the back of the building every week.
So are you rude?
I definitely, if someone picks a fight with me, I fight.
But were you picking a fight here, Stephen? I think you were just quietly minding your own business, weren't you?
Yeah, I didn't pick a fight, no. I was just doing my thing. I did make a comment about how I personally don't like trim milk. Thank you. Yeah, I made that comment. Can't take that back.
But that's not what this is about, right? This is simply about you sourcing in an environmentally friendly manner from a farmer in Oxford who provides one type of milk and it's not trim milk. Is it that simple?
Yeah, well, if it sort of attaches itself to our, small footprint that we're trying to do in our cafe, which I don't want to go on about because everyone tries, and we do recycle best we can, and we try not to use too much packaging. And yeah, we've got a few things we do, like free range stuff and compostable cups, and we do try.
How long have you been serving that milk for in your coffee?
Well, we haven't had trim ever, and then when we changed to that milk about 6 months ago, because the stainless steel containers were finally made and they worked, 6 months, and we thought, how are we going to lug these big 15 litre stainless steel containers around, and it's all just sort of worked out, and they work great. I'm really happy with them.
And by and large, are your customers okay with it?
They love it. I mean, we don't not have customers. We've got a really great customer base. I love coming to work. I like the people here.
Just out of interest, this is a question from an Aucklander, although Wellingtonians will be interested too, I'm sure. What are you charging for a flat white there?
That's pretty funny because I can't remember. $4.
Yeah, $4 for special Oxford milk and no plastic involved. Which is better business in terms of the money you make? Sourcing this milk from Oxford in these 15 big tin containers which have no plastic involved, or just buying lots of milk and having it delivered in the back of a Fonterra truck or whatever in plastic?
It's far cheaper to get it from the big company, but I'm really enjoying the relationship with the farmer.
Funny old story that. So it wasn't a choice of, it wasn't that he doesn't want to do trim milk, it's just that he doesn't get trim milk from the farmer. 1.5 minutes to 6 o'clock. Lots of feedback coming in. Everyone loved Ben. If you've just tuned in, you won't know that we had a 10-year-old boy read the sports news after Katrina finished the 5:30 headlines. He dreams of being a newsreader. So we gave him a shot. We're being urged to give him a job, but I think we should let him finish school first. TPP, Paul, you were right to raise the issue of the EU's very negative views of the US-driven ISDS system. Macleay sidestepped the issue. Matt, if Todd Macleay signs the TPP, he's signing it without the consent of New Zealand. Overwhelming opposition to the TPP from people who contact us. Todd Macleay, the Trade Minister, was on just after 5 o'clock. Dunedin Meals, lots of feedback on this. Andrew says more like muck on a truck. Michael, last year the sole at City Vision NZ rep on the ADHB board was censured for speaking out against contracting out food. Susie said, I wonder what the actual nutritional value is of meals left so long from cooking to serving. I'm not sure what the length is, but they arrive in the South Island frozen. Jacaranda, awful, more respect for our elders. Caroline, the worry is that these vulnerable people have dementia that cancel meals and will start cooking their own again and have accidents. Lots and lots of feedback on that story. We're going to try and chase up a response. If you do have feedback, text 2101, email us checkpoint@radionz.co.nz. Our Facebook and Twitter address is checkpoint_RNZ, and of course you can find Checkpoint and the live streaming on the radionewzealand.co.nz website. It's 6 o'clock. Kia ora everyone, you are with Checkpoint with John Campbell on RNZ National, on the radio, screening live on Freeview Channel 50, streaming live on the RNZ website. However you are joining us, thank you for doing so. Tonight, well, in the next half hour, why did a newborn baby fail to get the care he needed and die? We cross live to the Laneway Music Festival. It's all on for young and old down there, mostly young, it has to be said. And we tip a glass to our best known wine variety, Sauvignon Blanc. But first, here's the news with Katrina Batten.
Ngā mihi, O te pō, good evening. An independent midwife failed to tell a new mother to take her baby to see a specialist even though the little boy had lost a substantial amount of weight. The Health and Disability Commissioner says the baby died in hospital later after losing more weight. Our health correspondent Karen Brown reports.
Anthony Hill says the baby was born weighing 4.5 kilograms but was otherwise well when discharged with his first-time mother. But within 5 days he had lost almost 17% of his body weight. Guidelines require midwives to refer babies who've lost more than 10% of their weight since birth to a child health expert. But the unnamed lead midwife thought it unnecessary and a senior midwife agreed. The main midwife took leave and others failed to reweigh the baby. He deteriorated, losing 22% of his body weight and needing intensive care for severe dehydration before dying. Mr Hill says the mother relied on the midwives and he's ordered them to apologise to the baby's parents. This is Karen Brown.
The lawyer for the former mayor of Pitcairn Island says his client had hundreds of child sex images on his computer for a reason. Michael Warren denies 25 charges of possessing sexually explicit films and photos of children and is on trial at the Pitcairn Supreme Court, sitting via video link in Auckland. The Crown says police found 400,000 images of adult pornography and 1,000 sexually explicit photos of children stored on Mr Warren's laptop, hard drives and CDs seized from his office and home on Pitcairn Island. Mr Warren's lawyer, Tony Ellis, said his client wanted to understand the meaning of child pornography in the light of the Pitcairn child abuse trials 10 years ago. The Trade Minister says it's a very big deal for New Zealand to be hosting the signing of the Trans-Pacific Partnership trade deal this week. Representatives from the 12 nations involved in the TPP are due to sign the agreement in Auckland on Thursday. Todd McClay told Checkpoint the TPP is the country's biggest ever trade agreement and it would be inconceivable for New Zealand not to sign up.
It is imperative that New Zealand is part of this agreement. It's a good agreement for New Zealand. It opens up access to 800 million consumers in 11 countries who spend $27 trillion on GDP every year.
Todd McClay says the government has also managed to arrange a pōwhiri to welcome those coming to sign the TPP. Numerous Auckland iwi have refused to perform the pōwhiri because they believe the multinational trade agreement will undermine the country's sovereignty. The government has joined a legal battle to keep a $1.2 billion housing development in Auckland on track. Two community groups, the Three Kings United Group and the South Epsom Planning Group, lodged an appeal at the Environment Court to stop the redevelopment of the Three Kings quarry. The Housing Minister, Nick Smith, says the government will join the Auckland Council and Fletcher Residential to fight the appeal. Dr Smith says the community groups had their issues heard by independent commissioners during the consultation and were overruled.
It is of some concern to me that small groups such as that are able to cause huge delay for a $1.2 billion project that is going to provide jobs during the construction phase for over 1,000 people and ultimately homes for 4,000 people.
Nick Smith says the redevelopment is for 1,500 apartments and townhouses, but wouldn't say how many would be affordable housing. The lines company Unison Networks says it had no record that the Taupō woman who died on Saturday after a power cut was medically dependent on electricity. 50-year-old Phi Dean died at her Taupō home when supply was cut for several hours after a car hit a power pole. A Unison spokesperson, Danny Goff, says they're not able to guarantee a 24/7 supply of electricity as events such as this can happen. He says if they know a resident was on a breathing machine, they would have acted.
We would have been all over it. Don't get me wrong. In fact, our guys that were working on site, we had obviously trucks and crews repairing poles and things like that at the time, completely unaware of the situation. When the police and ambulance turned up sometime later, when we were finishing our repairs, the guys were very upset to learn that there was a lady in there who had passed because she relied on electricity.
Danny Goff says they advise all customers who need an uninterrupted supply of electricity to work closely with their health provider and family to ensure plans are in place if power is lost. The retailer Nova Energy says it's also had no record that Ms Dean was medically dependent on electricity. It says under regulations, power companies annually send letters asking to be advised of any medically dependent customers. In sport, the All Blacks Sevens coach Sir Gordon Titchens has added Dylan Collier and Lewis Ormond to a 14-strong squad, which will be trimmed to 12 later this week for the inaugural Sydney leg of the World Sevens. Liam Messam wasn't included in the squad as he's still recovering from an injury. Fellow All Black Sonny Bill Williams is in. Also, still there are 15 players, Adi Savir, the Ioane brothers and Ben Lamb. Titchens says he's pleased with how his Super Rugby players have adapted to Sevens and he's keen to see more from them while he's got them.
Just that gradual improvement. They played superbly well, very, very well in fact. To beat a good South African team on 2 occasions, both occasions at the death. We played badly at times. There's certainly a lot of work to improve on set plays and kick-offs, and we turned over a little bit of ball, but we get that right and play with a lot more ball, because I felt we were playing with just scraps at times.
The Black Caps will take 4 fast bowlers and 3 spinners into next month's 2020 Cricket World Cup in India, while Canterbury's Matt Henry has missed out. Mitchell McClenaghan has recovered enough from his fractured eye socket to join Tim Southey, Trent Boult and Adam Milne in the pace attack, while Nathan McCullum, Mitchell Santner and Ish Sodhi are the 3 spinners. And cycling has been forced to confront fresh controversy after a hidden motor was found on a Belgian cyclist's bike. In the first confirmed top-level case of technological fraud, teenager rider Femke van der Dresser was found with an electric motor concealed inside the frame of her machine at the World Cyclocross Championships in Belgium. That's the news.
A free degree.
This is a policy responding to a problem that is staring us in the face right now.
Who's paying?
Be asking the builders and the plumbers to pay more for the education of the lawyers and the accountants and the doctors.
High hopes.
I think it's good to see the Labour Party actually grappling with it, and I think it's something that we all want to be involved in.
The Third Degree Morning Report with Guy and Espiner and Susie Ferguson, weekdays from 6. Then on 9 to noon, the business end in the race to become the US presidential nominee gets underway. And after 10, psychiatrist Darryl Treffett, who spent 5 decades studying people with savant syndrome and believes there may be a genius hidden in all of us. Join me, Catherine Ryan, from 9 to noon after Morning Report on RNZ National.
The Met Service weather to midnight tomorrow. Northland and Auckland fine spells. Isolated showers in the Northland today and in Auckland tomorrow afternoon and evening. Waikato to Whanganui, including Coromandel, Bay of Plenty and the Central High Country. Fine spells with isolated showers. Gisborne to Wairarapa, also Wellington, fine. Manawatu to Kapiti, mainly fine but cloudy with patchy drizzle overnight and tomorrow morning. Marlborough, Nelson, Buller, Westland and Canterbury, mainly fine but isolated showers about the ranges tomorrow afternoon and evening. Otago and Southland, mainly fine but isolated showers spreading to the coast for a time tomorrow morning, and light rain about Stewart Island from late this afternoon to tomorrow evening. Fiordland, mostly cloudy with patchy drizzle, mainly about the fjords, and the Chatham Islands, mostly cloudy, a few light showers clearing this afternoon. It's coming up to 9 minutes past 6.
Thanks, Katrina. Have a lovely evening.
You too, thank you, John.
Katrina Batten. Yes, we're going to return. We're going to go back about an hour to a story we looked at about 5:15, actually. The Compass Group has been providing meals to the Southern DHB since the DHB contracted out its kitchen services on January 18. The meals are trucked and frozen, reheated and provided to Invercargill Hospital patients and to Meals on Wheels clients. Dunedin Hospital patients will get the meals from February 10th, so that's next week. Liz Green is a Meals on Wheels volunteer. She told us about an hour ago the new meals provided by Compass are not up to scratch. In fact, she says she wouldn't feed some of them to her dog. In the past few minutes, we've heard from the Southern DHB. We wanted to know how many complaints have been laid and how many Meals on Wheels clients have cancelled their meals. The DHB tells us Compass provides Meals on Wheels to 250 clients in Dunedin and Invercargill. The Southern DHB says since January 18, 11 of them have cancelled their meals. 11 in what, a fortnight. Checkpoint has been trying to reach Compass for comment today. The Southern DHB tells us national managers from Compass, including the Chief Operating Officer and Supply Chain Director, are visiting Dunedin tomorrow to meet with them to discuss concerns that have been raised. It says DHB managers today carried out a spot check of the food to look at presentation and taste, and no concerns were raised. It says an audit will also be undertaken by one of the DHB's dietitians. So the story is moving along and we will let you know what happens. 6:10. A baby who died after losing a large amount of weight immediately after birth did not get the expert care he needed. That's the view of the public health watchdog, Health and Disability Commissioner Anthony Hill. He calls on 3 unnamed midwives to apologise to the parents of the boy over the case. Joining me now to outline what happened is our health correspondent, Karen Brown, coming up the line from Wellington. Karen, good to see you. Well, this is a tragic case. What happened with this boy?
John, this baby boy was born and he weighed 4.6 kilograms. He seemed in good condition. He was feeding normally and he was discharged home the next day with his mother. At home, an independent community midwife saw him as his lead maternity caregiver. She visited on day 3 and on day 5, and on the day 5 she weighed him. He was 3.8 kilograms. That was almost 17% less than his birth weight. Now, under Ministry of Health guidelines, if a baby weighs more than 10% less than their birth weight, then the caregiver, the health professional, including the midwife, is supposed to tell the mother, the parents, that that child needs to be referred to a paediatrician, a child health expert. But in this case, the lead maternity caregiver, Ms. B, she decided that that was unnecessary, and that's what she told the mother. So the mother agreed, thinking, well, I don't need another visit to a specialist if it's going to be unnecessary. And so the senior midwife in this approved that decision, and instead they adopted a plan which involved regular breastfeeding and top-ups with formula. Now, at this point, critical thing happened. This main midwife, Ms. B, went on leave, and she told another sort of stand-in midwife, Ms. D, that she should visit and actually reweigh the baby on day 8. But what she didn't realise was the stand-in midwife was going on leave and wasn't coming back until the day after that. The upshot there was that the senior midwife who was in charge, the other one, Ms. C, she just phoned the mother instead of visiting, and the mother, who was a first-time mother, said, well, she thought everything was going on all right, so there wasn't a visit, there wasn't a weigh-in. The mother did keep on phoning in to the midwives, it was a group, and saying, look, the first midwife had said that my baby would need reweighing, and nobody's come and visited and reweighed it. But she didn't sound worried, basically, because I think she didn't know what to look for.
Yeah. So what did the Health and Disability Commissioner say about all of this, Karen?
Well, what happened next was basically the baby deteriorated at home, and on day 10, the mum rang up and said, look, the baby doesn't seem right now. The third midwife, stand-in one, said, look, you should go to the hospital. The upshot was that the baby ended up in hospital late that night. The doctor said, look, the baby weighs 3.5 kilograms. That was a 22% loss of weight since the birth. It was emaciated, unwell, severely dehydrated. Care was withdrawn and the baby died, and an investigation started into that. And Anthony Hill says basically it was a mistake. The baby should have seen a paediatrician. What's the use of guidelines if they're not followed? Also, the plan to monitor the baby was inadequate, lacked specifics. The senior midwife should have known that it was all inadequate. There were a series of bad decisions, and he's told these 3 midwives, 2 are actually faulted, 1 is just criticised. He's told them all to apologise to the family, and he says basically that the first midwife, the main one, should have had a competence review by the Midwifery Council. She's had that, and he's urging the Midwifery Council to make sure that all midwives know that they must follow guidelines.
Health correspondent Karen Brown, thank you so much, Karen. We really appreciate it. Karen going over the Health and Disability Commissioner Anthony Hill's decision on this very sad case. The baby who died after losing a large amount of weight immediately after birth seems to have slipped through the cracks, really, of a care plan. Coming up to 6:15, an extraordinary story now from World War II, and incredibly, more than 70 years on, it's not one people have ever heard of before. There can't be many of such stories left. Flight Lieutenant Charles Ferguson was given up for dead when his RAF plane crashed over what was then still called Burma. His incredible story of survival has just come to light. In fact, it's been written up by Lord Ashcroft because Hastings-born Charles, or Chook to his friends, was an RAF pilot who left behind his new wife Doris in England to join the war effort. And many decades later, Charles confided in his friend Brian Church about his ordeal. Brian says Chook was shot down and everyone thought, yep, that's that.
His wing pilot, they used to fly in pairs. His wing pilot he was attacked at the same time by a whole bunch of Zero fighter planes, Japanese fighter planes, and they split up and went in all directions. And Chook found himself According to the story he told me, he found himself with 2 zeros behind him trying to get him. And the only way that a hurricane could outdistance a zero, the hurricane was getting a bit long in the tooth by 1942, was straight downhill. So he put it into a vertical dive, and he said he was getting mighty low, and the Japs were still behind him, and there were cannon shell traces going past his cockpit. And he said, the last thing I remember, Brian, was pulling back on the stick, and he said, I thought, I'll never make it. I'm too low. I'm never going to pull out. And the next thing, he was standing in a stream and up to his waist in water. And he looked over to his right, he said, and I saw a pall of smoke pouring up. And he thought to himself, he'd seen aircraft crash before, and he thought, oh, some poor bugger has copped it, but it was actually his plane.
Incredible.
And,
so the odds
yes.
against him surviving that, as this article says, in the entire Second World War, about 20, somewhere in the region of only 20 people survived that kind of incident.
Yes, apparently.
And so his wingman, the pilot he was with, obviously just said to everyone, you know, terrible news, Chook's gone.
He saw the explosion. It was mid-air, the explosion. He knew he was very low. Watched for a parachute as best he could, never saw a parachute open, and had to go back with the sad news that he thought that Chook had been killed in action.
But Chook had survived miraculously, and then he was immediately captured by Japanese soldiers.
Yes, probably in some ways, turning a negative into a positive, probably the only reason he survived was his capture. He had 3 bullet holes through him from light caliber machine guns, I understand. And he was burnt virtually from head to toe. And his harness was blown off him along with his parachute, and he went out with the explosion of the plane through air, obviously not that far from the ground, and landed in a stream. And that would have doused him straight away and put him out. Probably saved his life, that stream. And then, of course, the Japanese took him prisoner straight away, and he remembers that part. And then he was very fortunate to meet a Japanese doctor who spoke English, who had been trained in California before the war. So it was a bunch of events that led to his survival.
It's quite a remarkable story. But what makes it even more remarkable is everyone who loved Chook and knew Chook had been told quite unequivocally he was dead. And of course, because he was a Japanese prisoner of war, he disappeared off the radar entirely. For how long?
Well, 2.5 years approximately, yes. I can't give you the exact dates, but someone will have those dates.
2.5 years. So he wasn't able to get any kind of word out from this situation he was in as a Japanese prisoner of war. And then the war ended and he got repatriated, having been treated pretty poorly in imprisonment, right? And he went back to where? Back to the UK.
Yes, the ones that survived, and there was only a percentage of them survived. I can't give you those figures, but they were released by the American Marines. And he said that they were so pleased to see, they knew their war was over. They were all very weak, very undernourished. And he said he couldn't imagine why the American Marines, grown men, were standing there crying, you know. And they were very upset when they saw them, you know. So that was quite moving to me. And I think it was very moving to him too, that they couldn't believe that human beings could become so thin and emaciated. I think he was 32 kg when he was repatriated. From a pretty big guy, you know, he's a very well-built sort of a character. You know, I think he would have been around the 100 kg mark, I'd say, when he was captured.
So he gets back to England. He calls his wife, who believes he has been dead for 2.5 years. And that had been a really quick young romance, hadn't it, over a very short period of time before he went to war. And he says, "Hello, honey, I'm alive."
Yeah, beat that. Oh, that's incredible.
Beat that.
Incredible, isn't it? Yeah, it's absolutely amazing, and it puts a bit of a glow on, doesn't it? Thinking about that.
It's a beautiful story, but it's not one he talked about much. He talked to you, but he didn't talk about it much at all, did he?
Well, I met his wife quite a few times. She'd be with him. They used to drive around a lot together, and he told me a few things that I think I was a confidant in some ways. But they were all very positive things about his wife. He loved her dearly, and they had 4 great sons between them. She, I think he probably was a little bit, but he'd never got rid of the anger, and perhaps not so much the anger, but the distress that caused him those 2.5 years, the anguish of the being separated from his loved one, and so on, and the brutality that he witnessed was, he couldn't come to terms with it in himself. And I think he needed someone to talk to. He needed a counsellor or a man of the cloth or something to discuss it with. But I was it. It was just, I was kind of fortunate. I was very fortunate to have those conversations with him.
And now you've told this story to Lord Ashcroft, who's written it up. Yes,
yeah, wonderful. And I must say that it's stuck in my mind for a lot of years. I met Chook probably about 17 years ago, and he's been gone now for 14 years or something. So I was a Johnny-come-lately in his life, but we hit it off. So it was just lucky that we had that those discussions and had that comment.
Brian Church, was a friend of Charles Ferguson. 6:22.5, coming up on World Watch at 6:30 with John Greaves, Syria peace talks, Iowa primaries, and Russia denies that yet another military jet violated Turkish airspace. It's Auckland Anniversary Day, and not far, actually it's Anniversary Day for the entire Upper North Island and Nelson, but not far away from us here, down on the waterfront at Wynyard Quarter in Auckland, the Laneway Music Festival is underway. If that doesn't ring any bells with you, Laneway is indie beyond any conventional measure. Bands outside the mainstream playing to a crowd of people who don't source their music from the top 20. It's a wonderful festival, and we're going to cross now to Music 101 presenter Emma Smith, who's shaking and shoegazing simultaneously. That's the kind of Laneway thing, isn't it? Do you shake it at Laneway? Do you look at your shoes, or do you shake it, Emma, at Laneway?
I look at my shoes, I look around at everyone around me. I also try and keep them from bumping into me, because people are having a jolly good time down here today, John.
It's a real indie crowd, and it's kind of indie pop, indie rock, hip hop. It's a lovely kind of crossover crowd. By and large, people pretty well behaved there too, aren't they, other than that fellow behind you now?
Yeah, he's having a groove. It's just an enormous array of music. You've got everything from Courtney Barnett to Thundercat, who's playing this sort of R&B fusion jazz, something you wouldn't think would be out of place on Blue Note Records.
Yeah, who are the highlights for you, Emma?
Thundercat was definitely one of them. So he was playing a 6-string bass, and he had a jazz drummer as well who played his crash cymbal so much that it looked like an elephant had sat on it. He did a lot of work with Kendrick Lamar on his latest album, one of the albums of 2015, To Pimp a Butterfly. I also saw HDU, one of my home favourites.
Yeah.
Incredible. They've got new material coming as well, which they were debuting today.
This is they played last night, didn't they? But it's the first time they played in, what, 2 or 3 years, HDU?
Yonks.
Yeah, wonderful band.
Grimes, incredible. Grimes is another one I'm really looking forward to seeing. She's got this sort of post-internet pop thing going on where she just samples from all over the place. But we were going to talk with her for Music 101, but unfortunately she's a little under the weather right now. But hopefully she pulls it out for later tonight. Huge crowd though. 11,000 people have come through the gates today. It's about 25 degrees, it's cooling down, there's a nice breeze here, and everyone's just popping out for a bite to eat. Hermitude are playing behind me right now. They're a two-piece from the Blue Mountains of Australia, and they play what you can hear is a sort of hip-hop, trap kind of style. But it's a great festival.
Oh, I'm very envious. Emma Smith from Music 101, which is a brilliant music program on Saturday afternoon on ANZ. Thanks, Em. Enjoy the rest of Laneway. Nice to talk to you.
Come on down.
Oh, yeah, I'd love to. To finish tonight, we're going to talk about something else that many of us like, and that's Sauvignon Blanc. The first ever International Sauvignon Blanc celebrations kicked off in Marlborough. More than 300 wine producers, writers, blah, 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 have converged on the region, famed for being really the home of the quintessential Sauvignon Blanc, known and loved throughout the world. Renowned British wine writer and BBC host Oz Clarke is at the celebration. Oz, and joins us now via Skype. Oz, I'm not going to make any jokes about you having the best job in the world, but how's it going there?
Well, thanks for saying I've got the best job in the world. All I can say is that it's miserable in London at the moment. It's cold, it's rainy, it's foggy, it's sleeting down snow, and I'm sat in the middle of Marlborough, surrounded by sunshine and green and beauty, with a great slug of Sauvignon Blanc in my hand. I'm happy, even if the rest of England isn't.
Yeah, it's pretty wonderful. Oz, can we talk about New Zealand Sauvignon Blanc? The world embraced its freshness, its youth, its grass clippings, all those lovely big flavours. Is there a reinvention going on, or are we resting on our laurels a bit and just sticking on message?
No, not resting on the laurels. I mean, the reinvention has to be, one needs to be pretty careful about this, because what people love is exactly what you did so well in the first place. So in other words, if you're trying to reinvent yourself away from the greenness, the freshness, the crispness, be careful. Because there are tens of millions of people around the world who every time they see a glass of Sauvignon Blanc from New Zealand in a bar or in a shop, their mouth starts watering.
Yeah.
And they don't necessarily want it to be full of oak barrels and full of leesy this and sulphidey that. Now, you can't stop winemakers. You know what they're like. They will go on trying to do more complex things, layer on layer on layer. That's fine. That's a smaller market. But the big market that we really need from you in New Zealand is never, ever forget why you were so popular in the first place, because you are simply the best glass of fresh, crisp, green, snappy white wine that the world has yet invented.
Well, gosh, what a lovely description. So, because wine, like all things, has trends and fashions, is New Zealand Sauvignon Blanc, let's talk about a market you know so well, which is, of course, the UK. Is it still very much in fashion there? Is it still racing off the shelves?
It's still racing off the shelves. One thing which is a bit of a pity in the UK is that a few years ago, New Zealand decided to drop the price when they didn't need to. We were prepared to pay the price. And I remember coming over here a few years ago and saying, are you guys completely mad? Why are you dropping the price? Your sales are going up every year. We actually think you're a really prime, a premium, what's that word mean? A premium product. Don't drop the price, just keep the quality up. And if you keep the quality up, you don't have to drop the price. You don't need well, most people, one or two wine companies perhaps accepted, don't need sales increases of 50% a year. They don't do anyone any good because they're always achieved by dropping the price. New Zealand has the highest average price of any wine from any country in the world on the UK market. I want that average high price to stay high because the Brits are happy to pay it.
Gosh, Oz Clarke, thank you so much, Oz. Really lovely to talk to you. We appreciate your enthusiasm for our wine. Oz Clarke, who is a renowned British wine writer and BBC host, who is at the first ever International Sauvignon Blanc celebration that kicked off in Marlborough. More than 300 wine producers, writers and experts have converged on the region, famed for being the home of that quintessential New Zealand Sauvignon Blanc. It's funny, there's all sorts of experimentations going on with aging Sauvignon and oaking Sauvignon and taking some of the fruit out of it and making it maybe a little bit more like a Sancerre, a bit more minerally or something. But what Oz is saying is the Brits just want the fruit and what we do so well. Lovely to hear him saying it. Thank you, everyone, for listening and for your feedback and for tuning in, however you are. We are delighted and proud to have your company. Coming up is Well Watched, but that is it from the Checkpoint team for this evening. We're going to leave you with 6 seconds of the theme.
You're listening to RNZ National, where it's 6:30. Welcome to World Watch PM. Greaves. Tonight, a historic day in Myanmar as powers transferred from the military. Americans begin the process to determine who'll be their presidential candidates and a push to nominate the residents of an island for the Nobel Peace Prize. Those stories and more in World Watch PM. But first, serious peace talks are off to a faltering start in Geneva. The United Nations had expected to hold separate talks with both the opposition and the government's delegations tonight. The meeting's been overshadowed by the deaths of scores of people in multiple bomb blasts south of the Syrian capital Damascus. Barbara Miller filed this report.
There are conflicting reports about how many bombs went off in the district south of Damascus, where the Shia Sayyida Sinab shrine is located. Whatever hit, it has caused massive destruction and dozens of deaths. Crowds gathered to view the burned-out cars and at least one bus and the extensive damage to a multi-storey building. The Islamic State group has claimed responsibility. May God never grant them success. This is wrong, says this woman.
These are terrorist strategies. They want the Geneva conference to fail.
Those talks are getting off as expected to a slow and difficult start. The main Saudi-backed opposition group has now arrived in Geneva and has met with the United Nations negotiator, but says it won't enter formal negotiations until its demands are met for the delivery of humanitarian aid to starving civilians and the release of prisoners. In an indication, if one were needed, of how fraught the situation is, a press conference spiralled out of control when a spokesman for the opposition group, Salim al-Muslat, and a Syrian journalist got into a heated exchange.
No, we've taken many questions from Syria. Thank you.
I'm sorry.
Mary, please you choose the
yes, if you have an English question, please raise your hand.
I will answer, if you allow me. I will answer all questions from respected agencies. But people who are sent here to create the problems, forgive me, I will not answer any question.
For its part, the Syrian government says it won't begin talks until it knows who exactly it's talking to. Bashar Jafari is Syria's main negotiator.
Neither us nor the special envoy are aware of the names of the composition of the other before we finalize these very important topics.
The US Secretary of State John Kerry has urged both sides to come to the table.
There is no military solution to the conflict. Without negotiations, the bloodshed will drag on until the last city is reduced to rubble.
The man charged with chairing the talks, the UN envoy Staffan de Mistura, says he remains optimistic. But given the current state of play, it's hard to see what that sentiment is based on.
The ABC's Europe correspondent, Barbara Miller. A new political era for Myanmar began today when MPs elected in November's historic vote gathered in Parliament. It marks the start of the transfer of power from the military. Aung San Suu Kyi says that her priority will be to try and achieve peace with Myanmar's many rebel groups. One of the last acts of President Thein Sein was to sign what was called a nationwide ceasefire agreement with 8 rebel groups, but many more refused to sign. The BBC's Jonah Fisher sent this report from the rebel town of Wan Hai in Shan State.
This is the training ground of the Shan State Army North. Several hundred of their fighters are being put through their paces by a drill sergeant. This is a scene that's being repeated across Shan State by different rebel and militia groups. Decades of civil war here has turned this part of Myanmar into a real patchwork of rebel and militia-controlled areas.
We are the governors of the jungle.
The governors of the jungle.
So we have to have every department.
Yeah. And the rebels have most things covered, at least at a basic level. There are schools here in Wan Hai, a clinic, even a hydroelectric turbine that delivers more reliable electricity